Okay, thank you everybody for coming to Bridging the Gaps, look at preventing and responding to suicide. This one is on preventing and responding to suicide in Black communities. And wanted to just introduce our speakers today. We have Ellen Yard from the CDC, and she'll go first. And then we have Lashon White, who is a MSW student and has her own story to tell. We have Marlena Strong, who is an LPC, and we have Laura Morse, who is an LPC as well. And feel free to add your own alphabet soup after your name and give us more info about where you practice as well if you desire. So with that, I will give it to Alan and take it away.
All right, well, just be patient with me for a second so that I can, okay. So it says host has disabled participant screen sharing.
All right, let's fix that. Do you know how to do that, Heatherly?
I do. You need to go ahead and make her a co-host as well. I'm a co-host, so I can't make her another co-host, but since you're the host, you can make her a co-host.
Okay, will do.
You did not give me that power.
I will. Okay. As long as I've been using Zoom, it's still new to me. Okay. Okay, you should have it now.
I do, okay.
Okay.
Let's see here. All right, are you seeing my slides?
Yes.
Yes.
Cool, okay, and if I start to break up at any point, let me know and I'll turn off my video. Sometimes it just seems like it's been freezing lately. But anyhow, so yeah, good afternoon, and thanks for inviting me to come talk to this group. I'm really looking forward to talking for the next hour, or talking with you guys and hearing from you all the next hour. So yeah, my name is Ellen Yard, and I'm an epidemiologist with the CDC's suicide prevention team in our team of injury prevention. So I'm going to be talking about a little bit about the topic of Black suicide prevention today, which is a really important topic. So in 2019, which is the year for which we have the most complete data, suicide was officially recorded as the 15th leading cause of death among non-Hispanic Black persons in the United States. Suicide is among the top 5 leading causes of death for non-Hispanic Black persons aged 10 to 34 years, and the 6th leading cause for those aged 35 to 44. So kind of tends to kind of affect more of the younger population among Black Americans. So I want to take a minute on this slide here. So this slide here shows the rates of suicide by race and ethnicity over time. So overall, across all racial ethnic groups, we've seen a 30% increase in suicide rates in the last 20 years. Rates among non-Hispanic Black persons are in the red line, which is a little bit hard to see because it actually parallels very closely the rates among Hispanic and non-Hispanic, Asian, and Pacific Island populations. So we're going to note that those are lower than rates among non-Hispanic white persons and non-Hispanic American Indian Alaska Native persons. But that doesn't mean it's not a problem, and the rates are increasing in Black Black Americans at 30%, just as much as they are with the other groups. But I also want to talk here for a minute is that, while rates are lower in the Black community, one thing that I can't really show here on this slide, because we just don't know it very well, is whether there could be sort of differential misclassification of intent of death by race and ethnicity. So in other words, when a medical examiner is investigating a suspicious death or a questionable death, could they be less likely to rule suicide for a Black person compared to a white person, because if you kind of have this like cultural bias, and if you have this, in the back of your mind, you're thinking, oh well, I know the suicides are more common among other groups, or not that common among Black Americans. You as a medical examiner, could you be slightly less likely to declare a suicide to be a suicide because you just don't know, and maybe you might be a little bit less likely to rule it as a suicide. So if that's happening, how big is the problem? That's something that we really don't know right now. I think that really could be a thing to look at in the future. This slide shows the suicide rate by age group for Black males and females in 2019. So what we see here are that rates are higher among males in every age group, and they're highest among Black males in their 20s. Rates then decrease with increasing age. And I just want to point out this is a little bit different from what we see with other groups, particularly non-Hispanic white males, which is the bulk of suicides in the US. So for other groups, you tend to see increasing rates with increasing age. So it's a little bit interesting here that with the Black community, you see decreasing rates, and then the highest rates really being in those younger age groups. This slide looks at suicide rates between 2017 and 2019 geographically. We see that suicide rates among Black persons tend to be higher in the West. But interestingly, suicide rates among Black persons do not vary a whole lot by rurality. So in general, for most, just in general, suicide rates in the US tend to be higher in rural areas, and then they decrease as areas become more urban. But we don't really see that trend with Black suicides. We really kind of see it's a little bit of a trend, but not really. It's really more kind of similar rates in urban areas compared to rural, which is also a little bit interesting and probably could deserve some further study. So this slide shows the means or the methods of suicide. Males are on the left and females are on the right. So for males, over half of suicides are by firearm. The next most common is suffocation. For females, you see suffocation is the most common, but followed pretty closely by firearm and poisoning. But I do want to I want to point out, so I said a couple slides ago that, one of the issues in suicide research in general is that it's not always clear when a person dies if their intent, for certain causes of death, it's not always clear whether it was intentional or not. That's particularly the case with poisonings. When someone dies by suicide and the method is a firearm or suffocation, it's a little bit easier, usually a little bit more clear cut to say this was probably a suicide, and that's what it gets ruled as on the death certificate. But when it's a poisoning, it becomes a little bit challenging, because if there's no suicide note and if the person had no history of known suicidal ideation, it can usually be like really difficult for the medical examiner to really know if it was an accident or was it a suicide attempt. And I will say, we were just looking at these data yesterday for another reason, but for poisoning, so all poisonings in general in the US, like over 90% are unintentional. But among white Americans, 4% of poisonings end up being ruled a suicide. For Black Americans, it's less than 1%. So it makes you wonder if that could be a potential gap there. And if maybe we are missing some of the suicides by poisoning in the Black community. I'm going to talk for a minute now about non-fatal suicidal behavior. So suicide is really just the tip of the iceberg when we're talking about suicidal behaviors. You also have even more people that are hospitalized or go to the ED for self-harm, or they have suicidal ideation. So in 2019, we saw that about 1 in 6 Black high school students reported seriously considering suicide. 1 in 7 developed a plan for how they would attempt suicide, and over 1 in 10 actually attempted suicide. So reporting suicide ideation is also Another area that there could be some kind of differential misclassifications, because you do have certain communities and cultures, and one of them is the Black community, where there can be stigma to acknowledging that you're having suicidal ideations. And there can be kind of barriers, and you might be more hesitant to seek help for a suicide attempt or suicidal ideation. So, another question is like, how are these numbers in this slide affected by these potential stigmas? And maybe they're much higher than they, maybe the reality is higher than what they are on the slide here. I'm going to be wrapping up in a minute. I just want to touch on prevention real fast. So, there's a real possibility that suicide rates are going to be, continue to increase, particularly because of COVID-19. It's been hypothesized or feared based on factors such as anxiety and depression, the financial toll that occurred during the pandemic, with unemployment, savings running out, social distancing measures. There's been increases in interpersonal violence with people being home more adverse childhood experiences and substance use, trauma from family members, especially frontline workers dying from COVID. All these could potentially be making suicide behavior a little bit worse. So CDC promotes a comprehensive approach to suicide prevention, which really addresses the broader kind of family, community, and societal aspects. It's really about trying to, we recognize the need to really prevent people from becoming suicidal in the first place, and really trying to bolster communities to make them stronger. We do have a technical package on our website. I'm not going to go into it here, but you can certainly look at this afterwards. That kind of describes different strategies and approaches for preventing suicide. So that's my presentation. I will stop sharing my screen now, but happy to take questions later. And again, thanks for letting me chat today.
Thank you, Ellen. Yes, and we will have times for questions near the end. So please try to save your questions as the next speaker may have the answers for them, or they might just bring up new questions, which I'm hoping is the case. So next we'll have Lashon White. She is an MSW student at University of Georgia, and she's going to tell us a little bit about her story.
Hello, my name is Lashon White. I am a social worker. I currently am employed at a DFAX, and I am interning with APS school systems right now, which I enjoy. But I know my time is limited, so just gonna briefly tell you a little bit about my story and why I am on this. A part of the reason why I'm on this committee is my son, Shaun Campbell. He was my heartbeat. I called him my little man. Other people called him Shaun. He was actually named after me. Instead of Lashon, I named him Rashawn. He was the baby. He was born a twin B. There are so many beautiful and fond memories I would love to, reflect on and share with you. But like I said, I know my time is limited. He was my pride. He was my joy, my little entrepreneur. He was an entrepreneur at the age of 10. He had incredible discipline and structure as a child into adulthood, really consistent with his studies. He loved basketball, music, reading, writing, very creative, Shaun. He had been writing in poetry and journaling since he can actually start writing. I got so many of his journals here with me right now. He enjoyed helping and teaching others from childhood to adulthood. He touched many lives. He helped the vulnerable populations in his community, and he just had a compassion for the youth. He loved God. He believed in prayer and meditation. He was just a phenomenal child. Like, I never had to tell my child to even get up to go to school. He just had a schedule. He was a big helper too. He loved family, especially his grandma, Poppy, and Nana. And he was very close to grandma, which was my mother. That was really his heart. He was an awesome uncle. He adored his niece and nephew. And teacher, he was a humanitarian. He cared for his environment. And I do apologize for my voice. I've been hoarse. I don't know why. He loved life. He taught himself to play the piano and the guitar. Actually, I'm wearing him on my shirt, playing the guitar. I don't know if you can actually see it, but he always had such a motivation and drive. And I remember when he graduated from high school, he actually placed his fist on his heart and said, "There goes my mom," and that was just like one of my proudest moments of him. But he graduated from USC Aiken, bachelor's degree with with his sociology degree, and he had a great group of friends. Actually, they're like family. We still keep in touch with them, and he was. I remember we used to talk about Langston Hughes because that was like his favorite poet. And when he turned 25, he went skydiving. He went to Paris. He used to do community drives, literacy drives, food drives. He was doing grant writing. He was actually learning how to do grant writing for HIV to increase the funding for the medication for HIV. They haven't increased that funding for that medication in, I think, over 10 years. So he was actually trying to do that. But it was Thanksgiving, and it was actually a couple of days after Thanksgiving, and we were in New York. He actually had to stay here because he was studying for finals. My son was actually attending Morehouse School of Medicine, getting his master's in public health. Actually, is one of the newest cohorts at the Morehouse School of Medicine. And to this day, I actually keep in contact with his professors there. And in the middle of the night, I woke up and I don't know, I jumped up out of my sleep. I don't know what it was, but I just got this feeling, and I couldn't go back to sleep. I said a prayer. Well, later on that day, we packed up the vehicle. We were headed back home to Georgia, and we got a call. And I pulled over to the side, and I was like, "Wait, what? Who?" I couldn't believe it. I thought they were lying. And my sister didn't live that far from where we were. So I drove there. I don't know how I got there. That was just all a blur. I seriously don't know how I ended up in a driveway. But we called back, and the police officer was there. My ex-husband was there, and my oldest son was there. And they confirmed that my son died by suicide. And I'm like, a child that I never actually had to worry about, put your seatbelt on, don't do this. Like, literally, like, he was the perfect child. He was the one that you did not have to get at. He looked after everybody else. And I said, "No, you got the wrong child." Like, all kinds of things were going through my mind. And the police officer, like I said, she confirmed it. And in the beginning, I couldn't even say the S word because I said, "No, this doesn't happen to my family. Not my child, not Shaun, not my little man." And I just spoke to him. I had never seen a sign, nothing. So when I finally came to terms with it, And, you know, people would ask, or I would say it, because at first I was ashamed, I'm not gonna lie. And I finally came to terms and I would say it, and people would say, no, Black people don't do that. No, I'm here to say that they do. I'm living proof that it does exist. Because my son is no longer here. So after finally coming to terms with what has happened, but what I have done is I don't define my son for that moment. That's why I had to tell you just that brief bit about who my son really was, because that's who he was. I don't define him by what he did. But I wanted, and what I do now is that I turned his tragedy into advocacy. And I have, because I know that it is important to unlock the awareness that suicide does not just happen and is not just a white issue, as everyone used to say to me. The rates are increasing in the Black communities, because I have really educated myself. When I came to terms with it, I educated myself. They even started a task force here, suicide task force. I don't know how active it is or who's overlooking at it, but at one time John Lewis was, but you know, he passed away. So I am now advocate for American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. I do fundraisers. I am a part of the advocacy events. I do the community walks. And I just try to bring hope, and I try to bring awareness to people. I have lost a mother. I have lost a father. I have lost a grandmother. I have lost a sister. I have lost a brother. But to lose a child, you know, and not only to lose a child, but to lose a child by suicide, you know, that's double trauma right there. And if I can avoid or try to prevent that from happening to another parent, then that's what I want to do. I want to be a voice for the voiceless. I want to be a voice for my son and any other parent that has gone through what I have gone through, because we have to look at my son that died by suicide. Not only did all the other lives and all the people that loved him, all those people suffer too. So, and that's just how I look at it. So again, I just had to share my story, and I share it every time I do the community walks, and the group of people that come out is phenomenal, because it shows the love that they had for my son, and the love that he poured out to them. So thank you, and thank you for listening. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Lashon. I really liked your point about sharing who he is and how he's not defined by his final moment. And I think that's something that we all need to remember. And I know that was hard to share that with us, but I think that really meant a lot to us to hear your story. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for listening.
So now we are going to hear from Marlena, and she is going to talk to us about stuff clinicians need to know so we can do the good work to help prevent and help the families.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much for this opportunity. I am Marlena Strong, licensed professional counselor and certified anger management specialist. Can you hear me okay? Oh, okay, great. Okay, just wanted to be sure. So I will be talking about unique skills that clinicians need. One of the most critical skills that any clinician, provider, healthcare personnel, advocate could ever have is cultural competency. I know we've heard it before, And when you hear it, it's like, what does that really mean? What it means is understanding that your worldview, your perspective, your beliefs, your norms may not be that of someone else. And even people that may be of the same race and ethnicity may have different cultural norms. So, what can we do about that? What we can do is understand that a part of our process and being able to better serve our clients is to not only be knowledgeable, to take the CEUs regarding cultural competency, to attend programs regarding cultural competency, but also understanding that you're not going to know all the norms and beliefs and language. I want to spend just a brief moment talking about how critical differences in language can be. The reason why language is so important is because your meaning of a word may not be the same meaning of your client. In cultural competency, to truly understand if you are understanding where your client is coming from, understanding what they're attempting to articulate to you, is to simply ask clarifying questions. Don't make assumptions. Don't assume that you know what it means. An example of that is oftentimes people in the African American and Black communities may use different words to describe their feelings, like I'm struggling, I'm just over it, I'm done with it. Well, that may not be alarming when you hear it, but what does that mean to that person? It's okay. Don't be afraid to make a mistake. Don't be afraid to ask the question, what does struggling mean for you? How does that show up in your day-to-day life? Can you describe struggling? What does that look like? Asking those clarifying questions could help you understand that over it, struggling could mean I'm feeling really depressed. I am experiencing anxiety. I might not say I'm experiencing anxiety because I might not know that language, but I do know other words that are common to me to describe how I'm feeling. Another example of accepting that there may be differences. Simply accepting that there may be differences is okay. It helps you become an advocate for your client, but it also helps with you understanding that it also helps with the therapeutic rapport. Just because there are differences doesn't mean that there has to be a disconnection. It's actually an opportunity for a greater connection. Not only will your client feel heard and understood, they'll also feel like, wow, I have a voice. My therapist took the time to not feel like they're the expert in the room on everything. And they actually asked me what this means to me. They're not making assumptions. Some risk factors, things that happen in the African American community, as both speakers both pointed out, is that there's this belief that African Americans are not susceptible to suicide. That stigma that also is still in the African American community and Black communities as it relates to mental health. Oh no, we can pray that away. That may be a cultural norm for some people, that a heavy religious presence is what's needed to help cure and treat what a person is experiencing. But there also is a high presence of the resiliency factor. Oh, because of history and things that people have experienced, we can push through, we can make it through this. And how dare I be struggling? How dare I say that I'm depressed when mama has worked real hard to make a way for me, or grandma did this, or grandpa did this, or uncle or auntie? And then those very things that are considered to be preventative factors, such as a strong family presence, could also be a risk factor, because a person may not feel comfortable being able to share that they're struggling with their family members or even friends who have never experienced anxiety or depression. It's keeping it on the hush hush. How will I be perceived? It's often identified as a weakness. Understanding that that's what it's like for that person. So they may not say depression, anxiety, I'm having mood swings. It's very important for you to be able to help them develop the language. What happens to the client? What happens to clients when we're not culturally competent? When we're sitting across from them and we haven't invested in the training, or we're afraid of being wrong or offending the client, what happens to them? They don't have a voice. They're dismissed. There's that lack of trust. A misdiagnosis happens. We're not able to develop an effective treatment plan. And who suffers? The client. When you are culturally competent, you can have a stronger therapeutic rapport. You become an advocate, and you have an increased knowledge and understanding to serve even more people from that same population. This is the human experience, and our differences can also be connecting factors for us. We don't have to allow our differences to be a challenge in treating our clients. There are several resources, and I tried to make it as short as possible for the sake of time, but there are several resources where you can get more information to become more informed about what's happening with the rise of suicide in African American communities. There is the Suicide Prevention Resource Center has a great article about the rise in suicide. The National Library of Medicine, the Center for Disease Control, which I know Ellen just spoke about that, the statistics showing the rise in numbers. There is a great CEU from the Suicide Summit that just occurred this year with phenomenal speakers, and one of them was Victor Armstrong. He did a phenomenal presentation about suicide in Black communities. So if I can leave you with anything that I feel would be a unique skill as it relates to clinicians dealing with African Americans and Black communities, that would be to not be afraid to ask questions, to clarify and make sure you're understanding the language the person is using and how it affects their world and what's happening in their lives. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Marlena. That's, if I got one thing, it's to be competent. You need to be curious and compassionate. And we need to keep learning.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah, it can be intimidating to be across the office or the chair from somebody and ask them questions that indicate that you're ignorant about something that they're talking about. So I appreciate you telling us that it's okay.
It's okay. People will respect the fact that you ask the question versus allowing them to leave the office knowing there's something you needed to ask to help give them better treatment. Your client can feel that.
Yeah.
They can feel that.
Yeah.
And they deserve to be sitting across from someone who's okay with saying, hey, you know what? I may not get this right, but I heard you say this word, or I'm noticing you did a behavior. Can you explain that to me? How is that showing up in your life? What does it mean? And they'll say, oh, okay. Let me explain further. And that strengthens the therapeutic rapport.
Well, thank you so much. And now we're going to go to Laura, who's going to tell us her stories. And then after that, we'll open it up. First, we're going to have just questions amongst the panelists in case they have anything, and then we'll open it up to all of us. So go take it away, Laura.
Okay, hello everyone. I am also a licensed professional counselor and certified professional clinical supervisor. I've been working in private practice now almost pretty much 20 years. I guess my segment would be probably a little bit more anecdotal as far as what I've seen or experienced in my career arc. I thought that all of the presentations are really important from the research side that the CDC provides, with Lashon really wonderfully allowing us to know her son. I'm really taken with that because it's unfortunate that we don't hear more people speak in that way when they're describing the loss of a loved one due to suicide. It is, you know, a lot of times very short, or people get caught up in, well, I want to know how, I want to know why, you know, all of those kind of questions that people may not have the answer to, or sometimes is irrelevant, you know, unless you're doing research, and takes away from the fact that this beautiful soul is no longer here, and what that means for the family, and really what that means to the legacy and the dignity of that person. So Lashon, thank you so much for sharing, and especially in the way in which you choose to share, and the fact that you are allowing other people to learn from you and your son in the way in which you do it. I have so much respect and admiration for that. So thank you very much. All right, so I've been in private practice for a long time, and just a story. One of my first career experiences was to work at a hospital. It was called Bronner Psychiatric Institute, and it was in Smyrna, Georgia, and it's no longer here. But I had to take that because I was working full-time as a clinician, and working full-time and being a graduate student. I had to make money, right? So where else can you do your internship but a place that's open 24 hours, right? So it was on its way out. So things were a little bit loosey-goosey, and they were combining people in crisis from psychiatric and people in crisis for substance use all in one big group. And so they were like, Laura, you can do it. You can handle the check-in services. I'm like, I'm this graduate student trying to learn how to respond to people that are at a very, I guess, critical time in their psychiatric care. So not a lot can be done, to be quite honest, in those settings, outside of you want people to become stabilized, right? But it was really interesting to talk with people who had been hospitalized, how many had come for multiple hospitalizations, and who was there for their first experience. The majority of the clients I worked with were not Black clients. And I know now for several reasons. One, resources, right? Psychiatric care is very expensive. Two, we don't get to that point, right? So if there's going to be some kind of a problem, then it might be long and drawn out, right? So suicide isn't necessarily a one act. It can be a continuation of several acts or experiences through drug use or other that lead people to that point. But one family in particular will always stand out to me. Was a young woman who had a suicide attempt, and they were to have the family session. It was important that after clients came in, they were stabilized, you had to do a family session. And so a clinician asked me if I would like to join. And I said, oh, this will be really great. I'm appreciative of joining. But what I understand now is that she was afraid. She was afraid, young white woman was afraid, because this family who was coming in for family therapy, it wasn't just the mother, it wasn't just the father. It was a mother, the father, auntie, uncle, cousins, sisters, and brothers. And no kidding, 20 people showed up for the family session. What I know now is that the clinician probably said, you know what, we're going to pick 2 or 3 of the important parties here to do this initial family session, but they came. And the clinician brought me in, and I think she just wanted to feel like she had a clinical ally, but I think she also brought me in because she was afraid. I don't know how to talk with this large Black family. And as they are understanding that their family member is in a critical space right now, and they don't even understand. So I sat back and listened because I'm a student. What I heard the family say was, we love you. At this point, we don't do this. This is not what we do. We would keep it in the house. We could have been there for you. You heard all of the things, right? And it wasn't, I'm not saying that in judgment. I'm saying out of this earnest of love and fear that they had, and trying to come to this family member from a place of, well, this is what we would have done in this situation, or we would have prayed, or we could have gone to the pastor. You could have gone to, Aunt so-and-so who is a healer. Seriously, people will lay hands, even in my own family. You heard, you go to Aunt Evelyn, she will pray with you and she will lay her hands on you and she will help you. And you do that. You don't go to this doctor over here that's trying to push this medication. We don't even understand what's going on, and we don't rack up a bill. Okay. And I watched the client sink deeper and deeper and deeper inward, because what she understood is that she did not know how that she had come to this place herself, that she was hurting, and she felt this obligation to now her family. So you could see the heaviness of it, right? And it was overwhelming. And so what I promised myself at that time is that when I become fully licensed, I will hopefully provide more structure in those situations, but I will try to find ways to communicate better with families so that they can be educated, and also to others. So education has been my passion since, for pretty much all my career, but really since COVID. So there's a poem song by Paul Laurence Dunbar, "We Wear the Mask." A lot of Black people know this poem. The idea, I think it originates out of slavery, but what Black people put over, and what we want others to see versus what we really are truly feeling. So the smiles or the stoic faces or the resolve is important, because it's a protection until it isn't anymore. Okay. And I know Marlena could speak to that more. She has spoken to that. Well, I feel like COVID, this pandemic, and I also feel like George Floyd ripped the mask off of a lot of people, ripped it off. And what we saw for many people was incredibly frightening. Not only like to our peers, oh, you feel this way? We're in the same profession, but you feel this way? How could you be helpful? How could you think this? All the questions that come up, right? On all the sides, right? But also ourselves to say, I've been putting on this mask and kind of pushing through, but now I cannot conceal the fact that I'm depressed or anxious or fearful in the way in which I am. There's no way to hide it anymore. What do I do with this, right? Some people had the privilege of getting educated or understanding what the resources are, knew how to turn to others. But when we're in crisis, a lot of times you don't know what to do. And so education for me matters, to say to a family, okay, there are different levels. Do you need to go to the doctor who could provide this for you? This is what a therapist can do at this level. This is what a psychologist might be able to do that overlaps with what a therapist can do, but not what a psychiatrist could do. You see where I'm going? And so taking the time to explain to others in a way that is sincere and focused really can be a relief. Saying there are resources out there. Google actually could be your friend when it comes to mental health resources. Not if you have like a stomach ache, because then you'll think that you're literally not going to make it through the night. But through mental health, if you Google mental health or what's involved in your area, or NAMI or CDC, you can get so much information, right? So there's a patience that is required as a therapist. And when you're burnt out as a practitioner, provider, I still think it's so important to say, at the very least, let me offer you some idea of where to go. Let me answer your questions. Let me help you make informed choices, okay? I am a mother and I have 2 kids that are college age. It has been really interesting as this mother who used to have puppets in her house with those play therapy puppets, and you would be like, hey, let's talk about the feelings. I want you to be light years ahead in your emotional intelligence compared to your best friend, right? That was my thing. And my kids would be like, you are ridiculous. But it helped them put words to things, right? I remember my daughter going on the bus, and this little boy was probably in 4th grade, and he was miserable, and he was talking, he had suicidal ideations, young boy of color. And she was, mommy, this is what so-and-so is saying, and I think he's in trouble. We got to help him. And I was able to talk to his mom, and she later, that's a scary thing too. And she was like, thank you so much. He has been struggling, but I didn't realize it had gotten so bad that he was talking about it on the school bus, right? My daughter at a young age knew how to do that because I wanted her to do it. Now, what does that mean when you're going through COVID as a college student, right? And you're under stress. And then I'm realizing that with all of the coping skills and all of the support that I thought they had, it's not enough. You know, it wasn't enough for my son. And what he started to exhibit in his first year of college was doing very well, and then plummeting, grades, all of these things. And me trying to take a step back to say, what do I need to do? How do I need to intervene? My pride was to be like, I got this, I'm mom, right? I'm an educated mom with all of these resources. I help other people, but he needs more. So what do? I open the space up for other people to come in and help and support him and talk with him in a way that isn't so much different than what I would say to him, but he could hear it differently. But I had to also give him permission. I don't have to give him permission, but you understand what I'm saying. And I had to give myself permission to say, it's okay to let people support you, right? And so I think that when David first reached out, I've been thinking about the humbling experience of being so privileged to help other people, right? And then the humbling experience of receiving help and letting people help you when you need it. And that's what I try to tell my clients and my clients of color. It is okay to get help and support. We cannot go through this alone. And if your main source of support is your faith, then extend it. There's nothing wrong. You have this cord, your circle of support can be bigger if you allow it to, right? And reducing the stigma. There's a great organization called Silence the Shame. It's led by a woman named Shanti Das. She is a former record exec in the early 90s when everything was popping in Atlanta with Usher and Outkast or what have you. And she had a trajectory that was so incredible until she was dealing with her own depression, the fact that her father had died by suicide, the stress of a best friend who had died by suicide, and her world was coming undone. And what she has chosen to do is go, just out there saying, let's talk about this. Let's talk about this. So if you know who D Nice is, the DJ who did a lot of DJ during quarantine, is just incredible. Like, he's promoting her. Other people are promoting her. She's going around and really sharing her story. And what she says, she's like, I'm not proud of the fact that I, had suicidal ideation or attempted, but I'm not ashamed of it. It's a both and, right? And I just have a lot of respect, and I also appreciate the way in which she honors the loss of her father and the loss of her best friend and the loss of others, to say these lives will always matter. They will always matter, and we can learn from them, at all the stages. So I know I'm kind of all over the place, but I guess my biggest takeaway as a clinician for you all who are studying to be clinicians is, don't be afraid of the conversation around suicide. I'm not going to lie. I love it when I have a new client who wants to see me and they come in with their Starbucks and they kick their feet up and they're like, I'm going to talk about my boyfriend. I'm like, yes, let's talk about the boyfriend. But the truth is, you never know where that conversation is going to go, right? And so as a clinician, you have to be able to say, I need to know more. I want to create safe spaces so that if something takes a turn, you can come to me. And then I want to be prepared as that clinician to say, I know how to help you if it changes in that way, right? I know how to help the client. I know how to help the family. And I don't have to do that alone, because there's a network of clinicians and resources to support you in that case as well. But being really open and honest, like, let's not make it something that is a secret to talk about. That's part of the preventative work, in my opinion. So I think I'll close out there. And if anybody has any questions, you can let me know. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. That was fantastic. What I really enjoyed about this hour is that we had people from talking about the issue from very, very different angles, to give us, the best look at the elephant that we could possibly get, right? If you're familiar with that. So I just wanted to open it up to the speakers if there's anything that they wanted to add or ask each other about before I open it up to the rest of us. Okay, and it sounds like they don't have any questions. So for the rest of us, does anybody have questions for any or all of the speakers? Or just a comment? That's fine too.
I wanted to ask Ellen a question with the suicide with the notes. Because Ellen, you mentioned, because I was listening to with the suicide notes, if they don't leave a suicide note with the poison, so how do they come? So they confirm suicide by if they leave a note, or
Yeah, so every kind of state and sometimes county, they all have their own process for how they kind of certify a death certificate and how the medical examiner makes that determination. So really
Mhm.
every single county kind of has their own process of how they do it. And I think it's often very difficult and challenging, when you have a death, particularly by like a drug poisoning, you just don't always know, like, what was that person's intent? Were they trying to end their life? Was it just an accident? Some people also say, does it really matter? At the end of the day, this person died,
Mhm.
prematurely. A life was taken that shouldn't have been
Mhm.
taken, and a lot of the risk factors are the same from a research perspective. But we do try to get numbers, but it's difficult. They look, if there's a suicide note, then it's a little more obvious the person intended to probably die if they wrote a note. They'll talk to family and friends and try to figure out, have they been suicidal? Did some event
Okay.
happen recently where maybe they were going to foreclose on a house, or maybe they lost a job? Like, if that had just happened, they might be more likely. But if they can't really find a reason,
Mhm.
there could also be pressure from family and loved ones. People don't want that on a death certificate all the time. So it's
Okay.
really complicated, for exactly how these death certificates really get certified with the cause and an intent of death. And I think with
Okay.
poisonings, it's because in the recent years, we've seen unintentional poisonings have increased as a cause of death, but
Um,
suicides are starting to flatten out. And one of the questions is, well, some of that increase in poisonings, are some of those unintentional poisonings
mhm.
really suicides that are just not being captured because we just don't know?
Okay. Or maybe somebody's poisoning them.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
So a follow-up to LaShawn's on that one, Ellen, this was for you. All about the you today right now. Sorry about that. Is there any sort of training for when they collect that collaborative, not collaborative, I'm sorry, uh, the, wow, I've lost words. Collect the information from friends and family. Collateral, there we go. That's the word I was actually looking for. Is there any sort of script or training for following that? Because what I'm hearing is that if you don't have cultural competence as an investigator looking at these, you may very well miss some of these signs because the different words that are being used that are defined differently. What sort of knowledge do you have of any training for cultural competency and those that are researching these deaths that are ruling and who are being the ones that are writing down on the certificates of death?
I mean, that's a really important question. I'm not an expert in vital stats. I wish I could answer that question better. But my hunch is that it's so fragmented because I just don't know that there is that training. And I think this problem even extends beyond suicides. There's a lot of kind of causes of death, and whether a death is related to a disaster, for example. There's a lot of kind of inconsistencies in how deaths get reported. And I
Okay.
don't think there's that competency training, but I would have to look into it further.
Okay. Thank you. And also, kind of as a follow-up, I'll put it in the chat, but is there any chance you would be willing to share those slides with us? There's so much information that I like kind of glazed over as you were
Yeah,
going through,
no,
but I'd love to be able to explore more later.
yeah, definitely. I sent them to David. He's welcome to send them out.
Perfect. Thank you.
Will do. Any other questions?
Question. At first, I just wanted to say thank you to all the speakers for being open and vulnerable and sharing all of this information. That's really helpful. And thank you to bridging the gap for creating this safe space to talk about suicide in the Black community. But my question, I guess, is mainly for the LPCs. But I know with my family, like kind of have a history of keeping all of our mental health related issues within the family. And if somebody is struggling with something, we're just like, oh, he can't get right or she can't get right. So I was just wondering if you had any ideas of how we can reach more people in the Black community, and helping them to be open and vulnerable about their mental health and actually seek mental health therapy.
Do you go, Marlena? Go ahead. You start.
Oh, okay. First, I want to say that again, that is kind of one of the downsides of being able to share and be vulnerable about what you're experiencing, the fear of what the family is going to say or what they're going to think. I definitely would suggest that some options in terms of being able to have that space is to connect with organizations that have open forums, participating in like NAMI. They have local chapters where you can gain more information that's not only vital for yourself, but also vital for your family. Being educated about what's out there. There are so many podcasts now that even if you don't want to share it with your family, there are several, I believe there's one for Therapy for Black Girls podcast that you can listen to, so you can be getting information on your own if you don't feel comfortable with sharing that information with your family, or you may feel afraid to talk about that because of what family may think. Other resources are I think Laura mentioned Google. Google is a great resource about learning about what you're experiencing, because Google will bring up so many resources where you can read articles, you can even watch videos of other people having that same shared experience and what they did to be able to create a safe space for them. Checking with your school. If you are a college student, go into the Counseling Resource Center and attempting to speak with someone there. Those are just a few things that you can do when the family is saying that, oh, this person is always messing up. Well, that person could be really experiencing something that the family just doesn't understand. So it's good to create a community and look outside of the family for other safe spaces and resources.
And real quickly, I know the time is short. I would just add, there are those examples, like for example, Therapy for Black Girls, of course, is one, but there's an organization called Black Men Heal, and the NFL is highlighting them. College football, I'm a big UGA fan, but many Division I college football programs even had a mental health, focus on during one of their games. Might have been like 2 or 3 games ago. So sometimes that's just a proof, like, well, the NFL is supporting this, so I'm sure it's okay. If it's okay for so-and-so, it might be okay for me. But if you don't even want to do that, find a provider or someone who just will validate that this is what is right for you, and that you don't have to prove yourself to everyone either. And I always try to tell my clients who do come in with, I would never tell, or nobody understands, my family doesn't understand why I'm in therapy. I'm like, then it's not their process, it's yours. So what do you need? And let's kind of focus on that. And I did anecdotally have a client that I worked with almost a decade. And it's in the last 2 years that she has been able to tell her friends and family that she seeks therapy. She's been with me for almost 10 years. And she is so proud that even though I think that's a long time, right? She's so proud that she finally got to a point that she could tell her friends and family that she is in therapy. And so we celebrate that. It's something that it means that she has lifted her own burden around that, but it didn't stop her from continuing on. And I always encouraged her, like, this is your process, and you don't owe anyone an explanation of why it's important and necessary that you take care of yourself. You just know that you need to.
Well, thank you everybody for a fantastic time. I know we are a few minutes over, so I want to respect our speakers' time. Also wanted to just let you know, if you see these little cards, hanging around the building, suicide prevention campaign, and there's a list of numbers on the back. Please pick up a few. They may be helpful to somebody that you come across. And yeah, it's got different numbers on it: SAMHSA, Trans Lifeline, LGBT, Georgia Crisis and Access Line. And just finally wanted to let you know that our next talk will be on November 18th. It's a Thursday. It's going to be from 4:15 to 5:15, and it's on preventing and responding to suicide in LGBTQ communities. So we'll have some folks from that community and some helpers to help us understand the different factors in that community. And if you are so inclined and want to learn about existential psychotherapy, Bridging the Gap is having our meeting with existential therapist Austin Hunter this Saturday at 11. So thank you, everybody, and y'all have a great day.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.